This is Euronews. I'm Helena Humphrey and you are watching special coverage over concerns about the health of Britain's Queen Elizabeth II. Well, Buckingham Palace announced earlier that the Queen is under medical supervision at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Now, a statement this afternoon saying that her doctors are concerned for her health following an evaluation this morning. But the Palace had also said earlier that the 96-year-old monarch remains comfortable. Well, since then, we have heard that the Queen's children, including Prince Charles, have assembled in Scotland and that her grandsons, Prince William and Prince Harry, are also there. Now, it does appear to be a serious situation. We've also had a statement from the UK's Prime Minister Liz Truss, and that statement was saying that the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news. Now, we should say that we are waiting on an announcement from Buckingham Palace, and in the meantime, here is a recap of the day's events.
Queen Elizabeth II's doctors are concerned about the monarch's health, according to Buckingham Palace. The 96-year-old British head of state is under medical supervision at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, where she was staying for the summer. The announcement comes a day after she cancelled a meeting with her Privy Council. UK's Prime Minister Liz Truss said that her country was deeply concerned by the development. The Queen had appointed Truss as Prime Minister in Scotland on Tuesday instead of London. According to the Palace, Queen Elizabeth is comfortable and is with her son, Prince Charles. Her grandson, Prince William, is on his way to Balmoral.
Well, Anna Whitelock is a British historian and academic specialising in the history of the monarchy, and she spoke to us earlier.
I mean, I think the country, probably the world, is holding its breath a little bit, waiting for what now seems to be pretty inevitable announcement. I think we are in the twilight hours of this record-breaking 70-year reign. And of course, the Queen isn't just Queen in the United Kingdom, she's Queen of 14 other countries around the world: Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Jamaica, Grenada, Belize, countries in the Caribbean too. So this is no doubt, I mean, it's a story that all eyes of, I think, the world are focusing on. And it doesn't matter really whether people are supporters of the monarchy or not. I mean, this is a woman who has played out a role through significant years of the latter part of the 20th century, now into the 21st century. Her first Prime Minister was Winston Churchill, and she just appointed her, what seems to be her last, her 15th, Liz Truss, just 2 days ago. She's done her job to the letter, right to the end. But now it is a poignant and a personal moment. She's with her family and she's at Balmoral. And Balmoral is a place where the family have enjoyed many favourite summers, memories made there of, the royal family, young children, grandchildren. Pictures of Prince Philip and Elizabeth were released on Prince Philip's death, in fact, to the family at Balmoral. So it's a special place for her, and actually in that sense she probably would be, couldn't be in a better place, and it seems now surrounded by her family.
As you say, Anna, it is a poignant moment, a personal one, a one in which she is with her family. But of course, as we're saying, the eyes of the world are also on Balmoral Castle in Scotland right now. And just talking about that record-breaking reign, I mean, it has defined so much of modern British history, hasn't it? What it means to be British, talking about her role even during the Second World War, when we know that she was also a mechanic, and the high point of the Commonwealth as well. The Queen encompasses so much of modern British history and what it means to be British.
I think she does, and I think, there would never have been a good time, but of all the times, I think for Britain to lose this figurehead, this anchor, this rock, this person who was personified British identity, and for some people, it would be seen as a check on the progressive nature and status of Britain. But for many people, it represents the best of Britain, and she has this indomitable spirit that survived through the Blitz as a young woman, and then, as you say, working as a mechanic during the war, and so on. She sums up the mood of the nation at so many different times. She spoke, of course, during the pandemic, about "we will meet again," and then that image of her alone at her husband's funeral became a sort of defining image of lockdown and the pain of losing someone in lockdown. So it is a huge moment, and I think the nation is sort of wobbling at the moment. What is British identity? We've pulled out of Europe. We're renegotiating our relationship with countries around the world. We've just seen a new prime minister being appointed. So it's an uncertain time, and there is a sort of sense of, gosh, what now? Oh no, not the Queen. Because she's just always been there. And as I say, whether we think the monarchy is an outdated institution ripe for reform or something that sums up the very best of Britain, I mean, she does command a great deal of affection and respect, I think, across the country and indeed across the world.
Particularly for that pragmatism that you just alluded to, for her work ethic. She's always embodied that spirit of don't apologise but never complain, just get on with the job. And we've seen that even, as you say, the beginning of this week when she was there appointing her 15th Prime Minister, Liz Truss. And that really speaks volumes about the Queen, right? At the age of 96 years old, there she was, still there for the kissing of the hands to see the appointment of her 15th British Prime Minister. She fundamentally believes on getting on with the job, right?
Yeah, keep calm and carry on. I mean, never explain, never complain, just get on with it. Because ultimately, she is a mother, she's a grandmother, she's the matriarch of the royal family, but she's also the boss of the firm. And actually, that is important. And, that dual role, that dual position was summed up in that balcony photograph at the end of the Jubilee celebrations, where she's there with her son and direct heir, Prince Charles, Duchess of Cornwall, and then the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and their children, and Prince George, the future king. And that's her family, but also it's the future of the firm, it's the business. And in that sense, her legacy is secure. And so as she's surrounded by her family now, it's there. I think she'll take comfort that she has a family there, but she also has the future of the firm, which she has put so much into. And in that sense, I think she will feel a job well done, because she has absolutely given her life to this role. The role, of course, that she was never supposed to have. She only became heir when her uncle Edward VIII abdicated and her father George VI became king. So, she wasn't born for this role. She stepped into it when her father died back in the 1950s. And from that moment, she has been in the glare of publicity. And of course, that glare has got ever brighter with 24-hour rolling news, world media. The changes that her reign has witnessed in travel and communication is remarkable. And she's remained ever constant, really, changing a little bit, moving with the times, but not too much. And in that sense, she, I think, will be an impossible act to follow. And she, her reign is record-breaking, and there will never be another reign like it, for all kinds of reasons. And I think these are the kind of moments to really reflect on this incredible life. And it's, of course, a woman in her 90s. She's lived to a good age. And so, it's in that sense something to be celebrated. But at the moment, I think, yes, there's a sense of the nation, the world perhaps just kind of holding its breath and wondering when we'll hear again from Buckingham Palace.
And you just mentioned there, Anna, that she stepped into this role, a role that she wasn't necessarily born into, but she stepped up to the plate. She did so with aplomb. Most people will say that whether they are a Republican or whether they are a royalist. Many people admire the way that the Queen has carried out her duties. And it's meant that she's had this immense popularity, hasn't she, around the world?
Yeah, she's kind of queen of the world. She is, of course, queen of the United Kingdom and queen of Canada and Australia and so on, but she's also just sort of known as the Queen. She's just sort of the Queen. She's been there. And yes, she's played this perfect role, but she was quite shy. She had to be sort of encouraged by her husband, Prince Philip, in her public speaking. But she seems to have just made incredibly good judgments about what to say at crucial moments. And, the fact that the monarchy has survived at a time which, when it's all about merit and progress and inclusivity and equality, actually the monarchy is all about privilege and birthright, and essentially white inherited privilege. But somehow the Queen has managed to retain a relevance in many ways and certainly respect. And in that sense, the monarchy has commanded and has continued to command, broad majority support. Not everyone, of course, and that may very well change when the Queen is no longer with us. But certainly up until this point, yes, we're in the 21st century. Yes, values of equality and diversity and inclusivity are now championed everywhere. But somehow the monarchy, which really is at odds with all of those, still survives and indeed thrives.
Well, news about Queen Elizabeth has, of course, generated a great deal of reaction on social media, and our team in the Cube is across all of it. Matthew?
Helena, the news from Balmoral Castle. Doctors' concerns for the health of Queen Elizabeth II and the fact that her family have travelled up to Aberdeenshire to be by her side. That news has travelled right the way very quickly across the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. As you can imagine, there's been a huge amount of reaction online from politicians across Britain's political spectre and indeed from politicians abroad. Many people expressing their concerns on social media. One of the first to do so was the new UK Prime Minister Liz Truss, who released a statement on Twitter. Liz Truss saying that the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. Those words were echoed on social media by the leader of the opposition Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer. In a statement, he also said that along with the rest of the country, he was deeply worried by the news from Buckingham Palace. My thoughts are with Her Majesty the Queen, he says, and her family at this time, and I join everyone across the United Kingdom in hoping for her recovery. Of course, it was only on Tuesday that Queen Elizabeth broke with tradition by receiving Liz Truss at Balmoral Castle. Liz Truss, the 15th Prime Minister during Queen Elizabeth's 70 years on the throne, a record in the United Kingdom. And indeed, many of those Prime Ministers who are still alive and served during those 70 years have also been sharing their reactions online. The former Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron wrote this on Twitter, saying that he was deeply concerned by the news this afternoon from Buckingham Palace, echoing the words that we're hearing from a lot of politicians. He says that he sends his heartfelt thoughts and prayers to Her Majesty the Queen and the royal family at this worrying time. A statement was also released by the Tony Blair Institute. Tony Blair, a former Labour Prime Minister. Tony Blair's Institute releasing a statement saying, "It is deeply concerning to hear today's news from Buckingham Palace. My thoughts and prayers are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this worrying time." We've also had reactions from other leaders in the United Kingdom, such as the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who on Twitter wrote that all of us are feeling profoundly concerned at reports of Her Majesty's health. My thoughts and wishes are with the Queen and all of the royal family at this time. The First Minister for Wales, Mark Drakeford, issued a similar statement online saying that he was concerned to hear the news from Buckingham Palace. I send my best wishes to Her Majesty and her family, he writes, on behalf of the people of Wales. But of course, Her Majesty the Queen has had a great influence, not just in the United Kingdom and not just in the 14 other sovereign states that she is the head of state of. She's also had an effect on the Commonwealth and the rest of the world. More reaction from within the UK was from the Archbishop of Canterbury from his official Twitter account, writing that my prayers and the prayers of people across the Church of England and the nation are with Her Majesty the Queen today. We also had reaction from one of those countries that Her Majesty is also the head of state of. The Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, also writing on Twitter expressing his concerns, saying that my thoughts and the thoughts of Canadians across the country are with Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth at this time. We're wishing her well and sending our best to the royal family. So Helena, you can really see from these reactions the impact that Queen Elizabeth is having on the world. Currently, of course, the longest serving and indeed the oldest head of state in the world. We can expect more reactions like this throughout the day.
All right, Matthew, wrapping up all of that reaction for us and your team in the Cube. Thank you so much. We can go straight over now to our reporter, Vincent McAviney, who is tracking the latest developments. Good to see you, Vinny. What is the latest that you are hearing?
Well, in the past few moments, Princes William, Edward and Andrew and Prince Edward's wife, Sophie, Countess of Wessex, have arrived at Balmoral. They had flown up from an RAF base near London in an RAF jet and then taken around a 40-minute journey in a convoy of cars to be at Balmoral Castle, where the Queen has been on holiday for a number of weeks. Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles, Duchess of Cornwall, were already on holiday in Scotland, not far from Balmoral. They have been at the Queen's bedside now for a number of hours. And the other member of the royal family, Prince Harry, we understand, also making his way alone. Meghan Markle, we believe, has now stayed in London, and Prince Harry is on his way there to Scotland. There has been no further update, and that update, which came in at around 12:15 from the palace, was remarkable in itself. They have a long-standing position that when it comes to health matters, they do not give a running commentary, they do not pass commentary, they consider it to be a private matter. And so that is why here in the UK there has been quite some shock, but also it feels like a warning to the British public that in the next few days or perhaps hours, there could be some sad news coming from Scotland of the passing of a monarch, someone who has been on the throne for just over 70 years, who is 96 years old, a woman who never expected to be Queen of the United Kingdom. She was only put in that place because of her uncle's abdication and her father's early passing. And she is someone who, for many in the United Kingdom and for many around the world, in the Commonwealth and beyond, who have watched her, do not know anyone else on the throne of the United Kingdom. She has always been the Queen. They've not known a king before. And so this will be a huge moment, not just in the UK, but around the world, as one of the huge figures of the 20th century. Perhaps their life draws to a close.
Indeed, Vinny, and of course, you make that point about the fact that having that statement from Buckingham Palace about concerns about the Queen's health for an international audience means a lot, right, for the British public. If we actually do hear something about the monarch's health, we understand that it perhaps is severe. It's certainly a symbolic moment. So talk to us a little bit about how this has unfolded, how we've learnt about the Queen's health, of course, not just today, but also since the beginning of this week as well.
Well, it is at all times worth remembering this is the health of someone that, as far as we know, is still alive. She is a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother, and it is a private matter. But she is someone who has a role of national constitutional importance in the United Kingdom. And over the past few years, we have seen her slowing down. The palace has said that she has had mobility issues, and we can see in the footage you're seeing there, she was walking recently on appearances with a walking stick. And when she went to the Chelsea Flower Show, she was using a sort of buggy, the likes of which we sort of normally see the Pope using. So we have seen a decline in her mobility. Obviously, earlier this week, instead of coming back to London for the transition from one Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to her 15th Prime Minister, Liz Truss, it was decided that she would stay in Balmoral. And I think that picture did catch a lot of people. If you've ever had an older relative, you know that at the end of their life, there can be quite a sudden loss of weight. And I think it was fair to say that the Queen suddenly looked like she had lost some weight. She did look somewhat frail. She was using a walking stick to keep her up. And many people noticed that on the back of her hand, there was bruising, which some have suggested if you've ever had a cannula put in, that's the kind of bruising that you do get from that. So there have been worries since that photo came out with Liz Truss that perhaps she was not feeling particularly well at the moment. And then this statement comes out. So I think there is obvious concern. She is someone who, though, in her 96 years has enjoyed pretty robust, good health. She has traveled the world, gone to more than 100 countries. She has stopped international travel in recent years, her last trip a few years ago. But she has continued to travel around the United Kingdom, taking on, dozens and dozens of events each year. The pandemic obviously changed that. And she has been without her husband now for just over a year. And we know how much she relied on the Duke of Edinburgh. She called him her strength and stay. And it is difficult for any person. This is a man that she met when she was a teenager, that she married in her early 20s, has spent almost all her life with him by her side. And she has had to be alone in what has been an incredibly difficult time, not just as a country with the pandemic and coming out of that, with the difficulties currently in the UK, but also a difficult time in her private life with the likes of Prince Andrew and the issue with the Sussexes as well. So it hasn't been a quiet few years for Her Majesty. It has been a very difficult and challenging time, but she's continued to play a public role throughout the pandemic. She was doing Zoom calls with members of the public, with members of the emergency services. She gave a television address to boost the country's morale. She's been out and about at events since then in public. So she's not someone, even though she's slowed down, she's never disappeared.
And she famously, of course, never complains either. And I think the fact of the matter is, because so many of us have been used to having her as the head of state for those 70 years, despite the fact that we have been able to see her increasing frailty in recent years and some of her ill health, it's still difficult for many people around the world to fathom of Britain, of course, without Queen Elizabeth II. So with that in mind, what is the mood of the nation, the atmosphere right now as we find ourselves at this juncture having this particular conversation and having these worries about the Queen?
I think there is a slightly anxious mood. And whatever you might think about the British monarchy and continuing with the institution of monarchies in the 21st century, I think there are very few people out there who will think poorly of her Queen Elizabeth II. She is someone who has done a job now for 70 years, the longest of any British monarch, a job which is focused on public service, on dedication to championing causes and charities and issues, someone who's gone around the world and tried to build with the Commonwealth bonds of friendship, of loyalty, of community, the promotion of rights, the promotion of freedom. And she is someone who has, I think, worked tirelessly. I don't think anyone can say that she hasn't. She has engaged in something like up to 20,000 public engagements. There have been hundreds of tours, and she has barely put a foot wrong, if ever. And so I think as a model of public service, she is someone who around the world people respect. And if she does pass away in the coming days, the funeral will be an event the likes of which I don't think we'll have ever seen. There will be pretty much every head of state, every head of government around the world wanting to attend and pay their respects. Whenever, she is probably the greatest soft superpower the UK has. World leaders, even, the most established world leaders and fellow monarchs do love to come to the UK and have a state banquet with Her Majesty the Queen at the likes of Buckingham Palace or to meet her. They like having a visit from her. She is someone who is a towering figure. When you look back at her place in history, she took the throne in 1952. She's had 15 prime ministers. Her first prime minister, Sir Winston Churchill, of course, was born in 1874. Her latest prime minister, Liz Truss, was born in 1975. The span of experiences of which she has drawn and guided her prime ministers through is absolutely huge. The world leaders that she has met, the likes of Pope John Paul II, she's met every US president, she's met pretty much every world leader of the past 70 years at some point or another. This is someone who has a unique position in history. And the whole institution of monarchy is set up primarily so that you have male heirs. But it is interesting that in British history in particular, you see that actually the female monarchs, the likes of Elizabeth I, the likes of Queen Victoria, have the longest reigns and sometimes the biggest impacts. And I think she has followed that tradition, and she will stand out in global history, not just because she is a woman and there are few of them in high positions of power, but because she has overseen and been a steady hand on a nation through a rapid change. And when she came to the throne, we hadn't even gone to space yet. We were still in the ruins of the Second World War. We were still rationing in the UK. And she's taken us through right to 2022. The changes that she's presided over globally, the creation of the Commonwealth, the changes societally in Britain have been absolutely huge. And many people just cannot imagine Britain without her. You have to be, if she came on the throne in 1952, so you have to be maybe 75, 76 to actually remember anyone else on the throne of the United Kingdom. For many people, this has just been a constant in their life. And I think when she does go, you will notice, and in many countries around the world, she's on the currency, she's on the stamps. She is probably the most photographed woman in all of history. And it'll be a big change when Prince Charles becomes King Charles. If he does keep on that name, he could change it. That's what he will become the moment that she passes. There'll be a coronation around a year, and slowly all those symbols will start to change, and a whole bunch which under her reign have sort of stayed under the surface, questions about the future of the Commonwealth, about the future of her role as the head of state in countries like Canada and Australia, all of those will be opened up. But in the interim, there will be a huge period in this country, weeks of mourning for a queen, and there will be a huge amount of ceremony over the primary 8 days building up to that funeral, in which the country will go into a sort of suspended mode. There'll be a cancellation of all public events, and there will, I think, be millions turning out on the streets of London for the funeral.
As you say, Vinny, someone whose face is known around the world on 32 currencies around the world, the first televised queen, essentially someone the world's never seen the likes of a queen like this, essentially. Vincent McAviney in London reporting for us. Vinny, good to talk to you. Well, we can cross now to Buckingham Palace and take in some live images as the world's media have gathered outside the Queen's London residence following the news that she is under medical supervision at Balmoral. That is her estate house in Aberdeenshire. And of course, we will keep you up to date on this breaking news story.